Hello everyone and welcome back to another video where today I just want to posit a little theory that I came up with. So sit back, relax and enjoy as I'm going to get right into it. But before I do, subscribe if you're new, that would be greatly appreciated. We are trying to get to 30,000 subscribers by the end of the series. I don't know whether we're going to make it, we're on 27,100, but any support will be greatly appreciated. I'm going to be making videos on the regular for you guys, so if you enjoy them, feel free to subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. But let's dive right in. So, this came to me when I was thinking the other night, why did Russell T Davies choose to bring back the Rani specifically? Now you might say, well, the answer to that's obvious. She's been one of the most requested characters to return for years. Basically, whenever a new female character comes along, everyone always says, oh my god, it's the Rani. And Russell T Davies himself has even said this. He basically said in an interview, everyone was saying Mrs. Flood was the Rani ever since she was introduced. So I just thought sometimes you got to give the people what you want. However, I think it runs deeper than that. Because I was like, okay, but why this era specifically? Why now? And then I came across an article from the official Doctor Who website detailing the decisions made for the season 2 finale. And then when asked what fans could expect from said two-part finale, Russell T Davies said this: the Rani is famously a scientist, and now she's a scientist walking into a world where a pantheon of gods has been awoken, which is magic in the air. She simply finds it fascinating. To her, it's a different form of science. She's not there to reject it. She's a true scientist with a very open mind. True scientists have open imaginations, saying, yes, we can go to the moon. Yes, we can travel in time. Yes, there's anti-gravity. So this kind of got me thinking two things. On one level, I was just really happy that her being a scientist is going to be very central to her character even still. I was really worried at the prospect of them bringing back the Rani, only to basically make them the Master too. So I think making her more focused on science and biology and stuff like that makes a lot more sense for the Rani's character, and I'm glad that they're keeping that as her thing, you know, her differentiator from other Time Lords. But another part of me thought, that's really interesting, you know, the fact that to her, these myths and these legends are just another form of science that maybe she wants to study is very, very interesting. And then it got me thinking, what's the most mythological and weird thing we've seen in this era? It's Bigeneration, right? A supposed Time Lord myth that allows a Time Lord to spread their regeneration across two bodies, effectively. So my theory is, what if the Rani, alongside another member of the Pantheon, created Bigeneration, basically combining her knowledge of biology and Time Lord biology with the Pantheon's ability to bring myths to life. But with that comes two questions. Why and how would she do this? Well, as for the why, I think that's fairly simple. In the article, Russell T Davies also states that in the past, she was a renegade Time Lord. Now she's the only Time Lady in existence. So that ups the stakes for everyone. So here's my idea. What if her reasoning for creating Biogeneration is effectively as a survival method for the Time Lords? In fact, Mrs. Flood's final words are basically, I've always had a knack for my own survival. But what if she creates Biogeneration as a means to basically make sure the Time Lords don't go completely extinct, because essentially they can multiply into multiple entities, essentially meaning that the Time Lord race doesn't get completely wiped out if one of them dies. Additionally, it could make sense that she would create Biogeneration as a means for her to effectively assist herself, basically allowing her to have her own separate version of herself to assist her in her schemes, effectively doubling her man and brain power, or I guess woman power in this case. This kind of would make sense when you consider that Mrs. Flood is clearly the more subservient and docile of the two, and maybe that was a deliberate part of the Rani's kind of creation. But then the question arises, how? How does she create Biogeneration? Well, for one thing, we know that the gods can somewhat be fueled by Time Lord energy. We see Lux being fueled by Biogeneration energy at the end of Lux as well. So potentially she gifted some of her own regeneration energy to another member of the Pantheon for them to reverse engineer. Kind of like what Tech Tayun did to the Doctor in The Timeless Children. However, speaking of the Doctor, as of the Timeless Child, it's established that they are ground zero for regeneration, right? The Doctor came through a wormhole, is picked up by Tech Tayun, who basically extracts the ability of regeneration from the Doctor. What if the Rani captures the Doctor and plans to do the same to him now, except this time she extracts his essence in order to create Biogeneration. This would also tie into one of the biggest mysteries that we've seen from the recent promotional images of Wish World. Who is the baby that she is holding? What if the baby she's holding is an earlier incarnation of the Doctor who she extracts the regeneration energy from at a young age so that she can reverse engineer it into Biogeneration? This would explain why the Doctor, could still do it later on in life, because it was added into the Time Lord genetic code when the Doctor was little. Or maybe part of the Rani's wish is for the Time Lords to live on. And essentially, the member of the Pantheon that she's working with grants that wish by introducing Biogeneration. As we said, either by getting a bit of the Doctor's DNA or just straight up manifesting it into existence. Either way, I don't think it's a coincidence that Biogeneration has been referred to twice in this series alone. Despite after the giggle, it was left pretty much alone after that point. It's mentioned once in Devil's Core where the Doctor says it tore him apart to face the Toymaker, but after that, it's pretty much not mentioned. So the fact that it's being mentioned twice and we see another Biogeneration in episode 6 does make me think that Biogeneration plays a part in this series finale. Plus, Gatwa did say that there would be some stuff to do with his origins and the lore of Gallifrey and stuff. So I guess adding in a new form of biology into the Time Lords would counter that, and maybe the Rani taking the Doctor as a baby in order to achieve that would accomplish that. I mean, again, this is, just a theory on my end, but it kind of makes sense when you think about it. It actually reminds me a teeny bit of the concept of looms, which for those of you who are unfamiliar, looms are a thing from the Virgin New Adventures that essentially the way in which Time Lords procreate in that version of the continuity isn't that they just, do some naughty time and some more Time Lords come out. No, they essentially are grown in a laboratory type scenario out of things called looms. And while this wouldn't be exactly the same, in this case it would be the Rani basically reverse engineering a new form of regeneration that would allow Time Lords to split in two, effectively undergoing mitosis. It is kind of something vaguely similar and would have big ramifications on the lore itself, especially if she did extract that from the Doctor as a baby. And maybe that is how, Susan could survive if, Carol Ann Ford didn't want to play the role anymore. If she could Biogenerate, Carol Ann Ford's Susan could still exist, but then a new Susan could also go off. I mean, personally, I'm not that big on that idea, I'd rather it just be Carol Ann Ford, but I guess if they ever did want to use Susan again, I suppose eventually, in time, you would have to recast the character. So maybe that's a graceful way of doing it, I don't know. Thinking about it as well, wasn't babies being grown the whole plot of Space Babies? Space Babies are looms, confirmed? Either way, I'm deep in the rabbit hole of theories, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think there's any weight to this? Or do you think I'm just talking waffle? Whatever your thoughts are, drop them down in the comments below. Be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.